The monster comes to our house every night. We can't avoid it. It's always able to get in the front door, and it's always able to find my mother and I. The two of us have tried everything to avoid the monster's vicious attacks, but we have painfully learned over the years that nothing can stop the pure untamed rage of this beast. The monster comes to the house at about 7 o'clock every night. Before it even comes in, I can hear it approach the door. I hear its footsteps stomping closer to the door. I hear it growling and shrieking as it gets nearer. My mother and I always try to please it and calm it down, but it's always angry again when it returns the next night. When we hear it getting closer, my mother usually tells me to hide upstairs. Sometimes I obey her, but other times I stay downstairs with her to try and fight it off. We always fail. Its wrath is too powerful and dangerous to contain. We usually end up with lots of scars and bruises. Sometimes the injuries aren't as bad. Sometimes they're worse. People always ask us what happened. We just tell them that we fell down the stairs or got into an accident, but I think they are starting to suspect that something is wrong. But we can't tell them the truth. They would never believe. The monster has been coming to our house for as long as I can remember. I can't remember a time when I wasn't afraid of this creature. At this point, we've tried everything. We have tried to barricade the door, lock ourselves in the basement, run away into the field behind our house. But all of these things only made the monster angrier. It will always find us. After it attacks, the house is left in complete disarray. It looks like we got hit by a tornado every single night. It leaves an awful smell throughout the house as well. My mother and I would try to clean up, but it would be no use because it was just get destroyed again the next day. It's almost 7 o'clock. The monster will be coming soon. My mother once again tells me to get upstairs so I won't get hurt. I had gotten a bad bruise on my leg and foot yesterday. I insist that I'm fine and ready to stand with her when it comes into the house. I don't know how, but she convinced me to go hide in my room upstairs. I've rarely ever had to actually hide in my room. Usually the monster unleashes all its anger downstairs and is mostly cooled off by the time it gets upstairs. Although there have been a few times when it gets upstairs while still fuming. I don't care to think about those times. Usually, we can hear the monster hollering and stomping all around from the bottom of the driveway. It would get louder and louder until it would pound hard on the door. Sometimes, it would break all the way through the wood. Other times my mother would give in and just open the door for it. This time, we could hear it howling and shrieking when it was still on the other side of the road. I looked through the window, and I saw it rampaging in the street. It was turning over garbage cans, smashing cars, and kicking over streetlights. It had never been this bad before. I knew that tonight, there would be a terrible havoc wreaked upon our house, my mother, and possibly me. I heard the monster make strange sounds it hadn't made before. They sounded much more hostile and aggressive than normal. It started to pound on the door. Its fist sounded more forceful than ever before. It would break down the door any second. I opened my bedroom door and looked down the staircase. I saw my mother standing next to the front door. I could tell she was contemplating whether or not to open it. "Mom!" I yelled. She looked up at me. I could see the horrid fear engulfing her entire body. "Go and hide. Don't open the door." She gently nodded before quickly running into the kitchen and out of sight. I knew tonight was a night I would have to actually hide. I dove under the bed, the first and only place I could think of, and tried not to make a sound. If the monster made it upstairs tonight, I would suffer more than most other nights. I needed to be ready. It finally broke down the front door and roared its terrible roar. The moment it stepped into the house, the awful aroma filled every room. I could hear it aggressively stomping around downstairs as it attempted to find my mother. I could hear banging, crashing, and glass breaking as the creature made its way through the house. Then, I heard the monster snarl followed by my mother screaming. It must have grabbed a hold of her because she started yelling to let her go. I heard the sound of smacking, grunting, and several more objects being thrown around the room. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle my helpless cries. Tears began to fall down my face. Then, I suddenly heard the monster move again. It was moving away from the kitchen and started moving towards the stairs. I could hear my mother. She sounded in severe pain as she shouted, "No! Please! Leave him alone! He's just a boy!" The monster snarled again and more furniture was turned over and tossed around. Even with the monster's grunts and snarls getting closer, I could still hear my mother's defeated cries from downstairs. I heard footsteps starting to rapidly ascend the stairs. I could hear it sloppily ramming into the side walls. I stayed as still as I could. I looked at my doorway to see the exact moment when the monster entered the room. There was silence for a moment. I couldn't tell where the monster had gone. I thought for a moment that I would be safe from its wrath today. I was wrong. Suddenly, my door burst open. There in the doorway stood the horrible monster. As usual, it stood very lazily on two legs, and it was noticeably leaning to one side. Its face was droopy and its lips were sagging down on one side. His hands and knuckles had several red marks all over. In his right hand it held a bottle of beer. It was about half empty. With a great and terrible voice, the monster spoke. "Sammy. Don't be trying to hide from me, boy." Its horrid voice shook the entire house like thunder. It began to angrily pace around the room to find me. It started to throw things onto the floor, breaking some of them. "How dare you disrespect me like that, you damn bitch. I give you everything, and this is the thanks I get?" It suddenly turned towards the bed. I could see the laces of its shoes. It was directly facing me. It just couldn't see me. I hope. The monster suddenly reached under the bed with its long, unpleasant arms and pulled me out. It looked directly at me. Then, in a soft and disgusting voice, it said, "There you are, you fucking coward." The horrible stench came streaming out of its mouth and directly onto my nose. I almost passed out. I wish I did. I screamed for my life. I don't remember much after that, or, I try not to remember much of it. That night was a living hell for me. It was one of the worst beatings I'd ever gotten. My mother looked awful too. She had bruises everywhere, and several parts of her body were bleeding. We sat together hugging each other for almost an hour after the carnage had died down. The house looked like a total wreck, but we didn't try to clean it up. We knew the monster would do the same thing tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, because the monster lives in the same house as us. The monster is related to us. The monster is with us all the time. It does this sort of thing all the time with no end in sight. And it never apologizes. I was sprawled under the covers of my bed, but I couldn't sleep. I would close my eyes in preparation for slumber, but every minute or so, I'd hear something that snapped my eyes back open. It was different every time. The tree outside swaying. The wind rushing against the walls. The house settling further into its structure. I knew these sounds too well. They had kept me up almost every night since I moved here. This whole new environment had bothered me, but I didn't know why. I lived alone in that house, so it was always quiet in the day, but it always got really loud whenever the night came. Perhaps my fear amplified everything I heard. Or perhaps not. On this particular night, however, I heard a new sound. I was closing my eyes once again in an attempt to sleep when I heard it. It sounded like someone rubbing their fingertip against a piece of paper. I opened my eyes back up, abandoning my hopes of dozing off anytime soon. This sound was not like the others I heard. This one sounded like it was close. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere inside the room. I looked all around for anything that could be making that noise, but all was still in the night. I sat up for a few seconds more before I decided to return my head to my soft pillow. However, the sound started as soon as I lied back down. I didn't move for a moment. I simply listened and attempted to figure out what that sound was and what could be making it. I tried to compare the noise to other sounds I had heard before. I knew that it sounded familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. I thought of a few things it could be. Someone was rubbing their finger against a wall, one of the posters or calendars was rubbing against the wall, or someone was quietly drawing something with a pencil and paper. I looked around the walls and saw that all my posters were completely stationary, so I ruled it out as an option. I searched for any place that a person could be hiding in, but the only places were under the bed and in the closet. I laid back down and shut my eyes again, hoping that I might be able to fall asleep, but as soon as I began to drift, the noise started again. I inhaled nervously and pushed the covers off. I got out of bed and bent down to check under the bed. I comfortably exhaled as I saw that nothing was under there. I stood back up and turned towards the closet. Just then, the strange sound stopped and the room went dead silent. My heart beat out of my chest as I shuffled over to the doors. I reached my hand out and grasped the handle. I shut my eyes tight and flung the door open. I expected something to jump out, but I didn't hear or feel anything come towards me. I began to feel calm again. I opened my eyes up, but instead of finding shelves of clothes in front of me, there was a lanky man standing about 6 inches away from me. He was about a whole foot taller than me, and his eye sockets were dark and deep. He was pale, and all he did was look directly into my eyes and smile psychotically. I screamed. Loud. It was so loud that I thought it would wake the neighbors, but the man still stared down at me, smiling. Just when I thought my vocal cords would tear out of my throat, I found myself in bed again. It was morning. Daylight streamed into the room. The only sound I heard was the cars and the birds outside. I looked around the room trying to distinguish dream from reality. Did I actually see that man in the closet last night, or was it a dream? Did any of it actually happen? I got out of bed and walked over to the closet. The door was still closed. I grabbed the handle and prepared to throw a punch if I needed to. I swung the door open and stepped back, but no one was there. It was just shelves of clothes. I looked further into the closet for anyone that might be hiding, but it was just various shirts and blouses. I only found something out of place when I looked on the closet floor. There was a small white paper next to my hamper I certainly hadn't put there, but who did? I picked it up and examined it. It was blank on one side, but the other side showed a picture that someone drew of a woman asleep in bed. It didn't take me long to realize it looked just like me. I also realized that the only way to draw a picture from that angle was if someone was drawing it from inside that closet. Horrified, I backed away from the closet and shut the door. I was about to run out of the room and call 911, but something on my closet door stopped me. There was a hole in the door. It looked like it had been drilled in. It was so small that I could barely see it. It looked like a small peephole, and it was placed about a foot above my head. I looked to where it was angled and wasn't surprised to find it was pointed directly at my bed.